2 minutes past 2 this afternoon, and yes, joining me this afternoon for the afternoon groove, we have Professor Dr. Peter Baofu, and he is an American visionary and author. Could you, talk about a little bit about yourself?
That I'm an American visionary and author of 177 books in all fields of knowledge: the social sciences, the formal sciences, the natural sciences, and the humanities. And I have also proposed more than 144 different new theories and visions of the human future in relation to the mind, culture, society, and nature. And I have been in more than 125 different countries around the world, and for my global tour, I do that in order to engage in an ethnographic research of humanity. It will not be focusing on one culture, one people, one ethnic group, and all that. It will be on all of them. So my vision is very global, is futuristic, and it tries to understand the future of the entire planet Earth. And so this is a good summary of who I am as a person.
The political system of Vanuatu. What do you think about the political system in Vanuatu?
Well, as an outsider, I'm not an insider, so my remark would be very neutral. I don't favor any specific group or political party. But based on my observation, I think that since 1980, for example, in the last 40 years or so, Vanuatu has undergone quite a number of different governments, and that is a sign of political instability. I'm not saying that that's good or that's bad. I think that it can go either way. It depends on how you look into the situation. But I do think that when you have two unstable political cycle, that is very difficult for a government to achieve something long term. Because if you want to do something long term, an unstable government is not very effective to implement whatever you want to do. After a few months or a few years, then you have another one, and then the new one come in, you have some other agenda, some other policy, and when you implement them, and then after a few months, a few years, and then you have to have another one again. So that is not very good in implement some of whatever the national goals of the government is. So that is a weakness in a way, but on the other hand, there's also some good thing about that, because a very stable government is not also very good, because it can be very conservative, it can be very unchanging to improve the situation, because the international environment is changing all the time. So when a government is too stable, too settled, it becomes like a frozen political entity. It's not doing much. So either way that you go, it can be good and bad, so it depends on the situation at this time.
So very interesting to see how well you know our history in Vanuatu. Because you have mentioned yesterday when we were having a little bit of chat about ourselves, getting to know you, you do have you can see the future, or you can tell the future or how it goes and things like that. So looking at Vanuatu, what is the cultural cause or reason behind this political instability in the government?
There are a lot of different reasons. Political instability is only one problem in politics here, but you also have quite a number of some other political problems and social problems. If you look into the corruption index, that is another major problem. But again, the word corruption is it's not a neutral term. But I prefer to use that in a neutral term, in the sense that it can go either way again. Corruption is not necessarily bad, but it's not necessarily good either. It depends on who you are. This is one of the major reasons, by the way, that corruption has been pervasive through our human history. If corruption is so bad, why do you think there's so much corruption in all of human history? Even in the most advanced countries, including the US, you have a lot of corruption too. So, but on the other hand, this is not to say that corruption is good, because the fact that a lot of people have been fighting against corruption also tells you there are some groups of the population, they are not very happy about it. So it can go either way again. So the point of the policy maker is to make sure that he understands the costs and the benefits when you try to implement a policy. Otherwise, your vision and your policy is going to be too unrealistic.
Right.
So that's very important. Now you ask for the cultural causes about all of this. Well, there are many different things. One of them is, of course, there is no a unified ethnic or racial group in Vanuatu. That's why you have political instability, because you have too many different groups. Now that is not necessarily bad and good either, because in different countries, for example, sometimes you have different groups. That's good for diversity. So diversity can be a good thing. But on the other hand, when you have diversity which doesn't work out, it creates a lot of social conflicts. It creates a lot of political instability. And you have no unified government, and when you have one, it doesn't last for a long time. So this cycle continues. So this is one of the major reasons, the cultural one over here, with the social structural effect. But you also have another one, which is the political culture of clientism, which is, what I mean by that is there is a cultural tradition which tend to favor certain group based on the group that you are from. So if you are in power, the chance is that you, whoever you are, tend to favor the group that you belong to. And you try to finance, come up with some funds, whatever allocation of resources, which will benefit your group. Now, at the expense of other groups, which you do not focus on, then of course someone else who is on the other side will do the same thing for his or her own group. So this is the conflicting struggle among different groups, and this kind of political culture is not a very cohesive. It encourages polarization into different groups. So that is one of the major reasons for the political instability. You don't have a kind of political homogeneity such that the government is unified around certain things. For example, by contrast, the Chinese government is much more homogeneous by comparison with the different political culture. So again, there's good and bad too. You can go either.
Struggles and how do I say, difficulties in the countries. What is the solution that you can propose to us, so that we will think in a long term that okay, right, if we want our country to go this way, we have to think of a solution to do like this. So what are the solutions that you can give us this very afternoon?
I think the solution, there are four major considerations: short-term, long-term, domestic, and international. So you have to consider all of them, otherwise it would not be very complete. I'm not sure if we have time to talk about all of them, but I have written many books about all of this anyway. So let me give you some examples about each of the four. Let me talk about the domestic first, and then the international, and the short term and the long term. The domestic, I think that one of, as I mentioned before, one of the political problems in Vanuatu that I have observed is political instability, the cycle. The turnover of governments is too often. You need certain political stability to develop. If you ask me why Vanuatu is poor, I can tell you now, one of the major reasons is because the government is too unstable. You need to have a long-term stable government. Look at China is a good example. China has been able since the 1980s and 1970s to transform itself to become the global economic superpower, surpassing the US in terms of GNP, purchasing power parity. So why? Because they have a very stable political government. You don't have a turnover of the presidency or the prime minister or something like that once every 1 year or 2 years or 3 months or
Actually,
whatever.
it's supposed to be 4 years.
But so they have been so stable that they are able to focus their time and their energy to transform the whole society. And also the Chinese population are much more homogeneous, and they are much more collectivist too. They work together with the government. It's not like the US, which is very individualistic. The political culture there is much more collectivist. So the people and the government, they work together. They think about the common good. They work together. This is exactly what is lacking in Vanuatu. You don't have that kind of political unity. You don't have that kind of homogeneous political culture. So I'm just giving you one example, not because I want you to be like China, but because I want to give an example of what you are lacking. Now, how can you implement one for Vanuatu? I think that is a question that the local people have to decide, not me. I can only give you a vision, but how you want to implement that in terms of specific steps and shapes and size and all that, I think that each country has its own peculiar features and attributes. So they have to consider how to fit that into whatever the political culture and political system is. So this, I think, is a very important thing that the local people need to have. I do think that one of the political solutions is that Vanuatu also lacks a political ideology which can unify the country. So the political instability in the political structure also has a reflection in the political culture, which is the lack of a political ideology which can unify all of them. That's why you have so many turnover. You have so many different groups. Each group care only about itself and try to get some money, funding, whatever. Vote for me, and my group is going to support your group, and the other group will ask the same thing to their own group. So over time, you have this kind of very small parties, and each of them trying to compete, collide, and align whatever they can do, form a government, this and that. That is more or less like a parliamentary political system like the one that you see in the UK, for example. But unfortunately, the history of the political system in the UK is a mess. So I'm not going to go further into that. Look about how many governments do they have in the last few years and what they have done in terms of the political and economic development. So in the case of Vanuatu, I think that this is something that you need to have. Now, how do you have it? What do you need to have? Then we have to go now to the external one. That's my answer to your long question.
Well, thank you very much, Professor, and also Dr. Peter Baofu for taking the time to come to the studio and letting me know what you do and what you have done, you know, in a long-term run for your global trip. Thank you very much. It's my privilege to have known you, and it's been very interesting how our talks have been and how your ideas, how you predict your visions, your visionary in different globally, politically wise, social wise, or anything wise that you have mentioned to me for this very afternoon. I am so pleased to have met you. Thanks a lot for coming in. Hopefully, if you do come again, I'll be here in the studio, and anytime you want to come and have a pop along and say, hi Jade, I'm here, you are very most welcome to come back to the studio, and we'll have another segment on what other things that we can talk about for the future. So thank you very much. I am very, very pleased to have you in the studio.
And thank you, Jay, for inviting me.
You're very welcome.